Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Today wasn't too much in exploring the inside, but it is also not the amount that we explore the inside, but it is the importance, it's the impact, it's the recognition of, right, how much we've actually evolved. And we evolved from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, week to week, year to year, lifetime to lifetime. And that's the truth. And sometimes we think that we all need to be going 100 miles an hour, but it's something I've come to appreciate, especially, I would say, for a while now, for years, right? But still not long enough. I wish it was a lesson I learned when I was a teenager that it's not necessarily about quantity, it's about quality. And there was quality in the lessons today, even though I wasn't taking anything in, from anybody else. I wasn't listening in on anybody else's conversation, but only in my own experience. And then in contemplation of that experience, that, we sometimes learn more in that than any other directive that's coming at us. And that is a truth. And it was something that I appreciated today. I did explore a little bit on the outside. I walked a little bit, took a bus, walked a little bit more, right? Then I went and spent some time with my sister. I made a corn chowder for lunch, and we had lunch together. And she's been recuperating from a stay. She had a pretty serious operation earlier in the fall, and she's been in recuperation. And also at this moment, her eyes are not that great. So she's trying not to bump into walls and trip over the furniture, even in her own home. And she's been a little bit cooped up. So I thought maybe I would just go and spend some time with her today, do a little bit of housework, make her some soup. And, I thought it was going to be, well, I don't know what I really thought it was going to be. My sister is a very headstrong person. She has always been the matriarch in the family. She doesn't kind of move in any way that I move. And it doesn't mean that she doesn't have amazing qualities, caring qualities about her, right? She does come from two dynamic parents, just as I did. But sometimes it's in that divvying up in dinner. Somebody gets a little bit more mashed potatoes and a little bit less carrots. It's not an even amount of each dish. And just as much as I've rubbed her badly in her life, she's rubbed me the same way. Maybe not the same way, but in the same feeling of that. And, we have been kind of living our own lives, right? Doing our own thing and not spending as much time together as we have been in, well, I would say past years, even. And that has to be okay. And the fact that our relationship, even though it has changed, it's still a loving, caring relationship. We dance in our relationships, don't we? Because we have idiosyncrasies, things we like about each other, things we probably don't care too much about each other. But we've been kind of feeling the same way, exactly the same way. And we have been okay with spending time and doing our own things, but there are times, right? You never deny your own. And it's something that I didn't grow up with that saying. That is actually a saying or a quote that I got out of a book, and it was called The Camerons. And I can't remember the author's name, but it was one of my favorite books. I have read it numerous times. It's actually a book, a legacy book on a family from Scotland, and or is it Ireland? And then she married somebody who was Scottish, and it's them in, working in their relationship, working in their marriage, and then having children and having dynamic and different children. And, it is in that tug and pull in being, a good parent and kind of missing the marks sometimes. And then how that all comes together in a way that we forgive ourselves, we forgive each other, and we move on for that and accept each other's limitations in life. If we don't specifically, right, ruin each other's lives, and sometimes, those small things we talked a little bit about yesterday, those cracks sometimes that we turn into mile long crevices, right? That the things that are just not working as well doesn't mean they're not working. It's just mean we have to adapt, we have to conquer, we have to use consideration, we have to use boundaries, right? And we have to learn each other's boundaries, and we have to learn the likes and the dislikes and do our very best to accommodate that. It doesn't mean necessarily, I'm saying necessarily, that we're codependent. Hello, Tammy dear. Thank you so much for coming into my live tonight. I so appreciate it. It's not like we're codependent on each other, but in a way, right? You never deny your own, because in the end, that's all you've got. And I'm not saying specifically that applies to just blood. That can apply to your friends, that can apply to your coworkers, right? Your clubs, your networks, right? In just appreciating that, if we talk about baseline of values, I think it's very important, because we do live in a world where we're that close to each other that we can't just expect to understand how one culture moves, right? And how they have their values in comparison to how we have our values. And it reminds me of a joke, and it is a joke, and it's a respectful joke, and not only is it a respectful joke, there's a lesson and a moral in this joke, and I'm going to tell it to you, okay? And some of you may have heard this one before, some of you may have not, right? And I'm not pointing out any cultures, I'm just using these cultures as an example. We'll start with Americans or Canadians, right? And there's a father and a son, and they're walking down the sidewalk, right? And the little boy has a bit of a cold, and the father bends down, and he takes his Kleenex out of his pocket, and he bends down to the little boy, and he hands him the Kleenex, and the little boy takes it up to his nose, and he blows his nose. Oh, sorry. I did that one last. Let's go back to that. There's a Chinese father and a Chinese son walking this way. Okay. There's a Caucasian, right? Father and son, and they're walking on the sidewalks this way. And the Chinese father notices that his son has a runny nose, and he says to his son, right? Your nose is running. And the little boy takes his nose and he takes his two fingers like this and he grabs the booger out of his nose and he flings it across onto the boulevard, right? And the little boy on coming from the other way, the Caucasian little boy's tugging on his dad's shirt. Daddy, daddy, did you see what that little boy did? How he took his booger and he threw it just with his fingers and he threw it away. And he goes, well, that's how, they do it maybe in China or in Asia. And so they continue walking and but when he was talking to his son, he noticed his own son has a runny nose. So he digs into his pocket and he gives his son the Kleenex and he says, blow your nose. The little boy blows his nose, horks into the Kleenex and he gives the Kleenex back to his dad and his dad tucks it up and he puts it back in his pocket. And the little Chinese boy who's walking down the sidewalk with his father's tugging on his father's coat. Daddy, daddy, did you see what that little boy did? Right? He blew into this paper and he saved it. Right? He saved it. But these are cultural differences. And how many cultures are there out in the world? How many ways are people blowing their nose when they have a cold? Those are only, right, two cultures, but there are many, many ways I'm going to assume that people blow their nose. I know lots of people, right? They don't even blow their nose, they hork it back and then they spit it on the sidewalk. Right? But that's the way they were brought up. And that's their maybe not culture, but that are family traditions. That's the way their dad did it, their grandfather did it, and that's how they do it. And so we look at these things and we look at it in a negative way. We look at it in a negative tone, like it's not proper. But it is what it is. It's neither proper or improper. It's just a way, it's a cultural difference. But because we live so close together in this day and age, that we can't be expected to know every culture's set of values. You know, even though we hear terrible things about Iranians and stuff, right? The 9/11 thing. And, we have these ideas about Iranians being bad guys, right? Not good people. And I personally have a very big connection with a family who live in Iran. And I haven't spoken to them for a while, but I try, their daughter's on Instagram every once in a while, and I'll send her a like or let her know that I'm still kicking. And every once in a while, I'll send her a message. But we don't really pay attention. We listen to what other people are thinking. We react towards people because we live a different way. We have different sets of values. But if you were to go to Iran, it wouldn't matter what nationality you were. You can be a total enemy. You could be like ancient enemy. And if you knocked on their door, they would invite you in. They would serve you dinner. They would treat you like a friend. They would treat you like the guest that you are when they invited you into their home. And that's their culture, right? Now, maybe it might be a different story once you leave and they walk down the sidewalk and they see you. But these are the cultural traditions that are out there in the world, and we don't know. How can we keep up with that? How many different nationalities are there out there? And how many of these people in these countries are actually online and connecting with people from other parts of the world? I would say probably a lot, unless you're living in North Korea. But even if I'm going to use North Korea as an example, they have their own tradition, their own set of values, their own ideas. And I truly, truly believe that as we move forward and as we get closer and it becomes just a part of our life that we are, right? It takes all kinds to make the world. It really does. But at the same time, right? I can't expect somebody from the other side of the world to understand my boundaries, right? And my boundaries are not just specifically made for me. Some of them are that are directly correlated to my upbringing and some of those traumas, right? Like, but I can't expect that even anybody in my neighborhood are going to recognize that I come from an upbringing that has made me sensitive to being yelled at, right? And they're not going to know that if they yell at me, they're going to get a reaction to that because, right, this is something that is in me. And I do my very best. And there are moments when I can go, right, they don't know, they don't understand. But if you're going to treat me badly to my face, right, that's going to trigger me because I don't allow that, right? And Tammy was talking about being a steward. She was commenting in one of the videos tonight, about being a steward. And we have to remember we have to be stewards to ourselves, right? Because nobody understands us like we understand us. We don't know what will trigger us. We don't necessarily, well, other people don't know what will trigger us. Other people won't know what will make us happy. And that's why it's important, right? To understand that it takes all kinds to make the world and to never deny your own, because in the end, that's all you've got. But that's because, right, nobody understands you like your own does, right? And we feel comfortable in that. And we understand that, my sisters are not going to yell at me. They're not going to disrespect me to my face. They might behind my back and, right, talking to each other and stuff. But in my presence, I can trust that I can be around them. That wasn't always the case, right? I remember I right, I was my sister's best friend and I would go to her house constantly, numerous times a week. And I'd walk in the door and they criticize my clothes, criticize the way I looked, my hair, my right, the weight I had gained, right? Or the even the weight that I lost. You're losing too much weight, Cindy. And that criticism was the norm in our family. Remember what I said? Like I come from two dynamic parents, but my sisters come from also those same two dynamic families. And right, being that person who didn't like to be yelled at, you can imagine I was my father's daughter because my father never raised us. Never. I can't remember a time that my father raised his voice. And all honesty, I only remember when he was visibly, like visibly angry once in my entire life. And that anger wasn't even like anger at me because I had done something terribly bad. But that anger was the fact that he couldn't find us kids, right? We were living on a farm at that time, and there were lots of abandoned buildings and sheds and stuff on this farm. And we found parts for go-kart, and we were building a go-kart in one of these sheds. And because we lived on the farm and we were spending all day in the shed working on it, painting it, putting wheels on it, right? And my dad was calling us and he couldn't find us, and all us kids were in that shed, and he was terrified. He was always worried that some creepo was going to get his girls. He only had girls, and it was I, it's hard to say because my sister was molested when she was a child, and so that experience, right, put my dad in high alert for his kids, right? And he was so angry, right? I guess he heard us giggling or something. He'd been searching the farm, like 365 acres. We were like feral kids. We were just gone, right? And when he found us and opened up that shed door, that anger was actually relief, right? It was that way that he was just like, oh my goodness, my kids are okay. And it was just like, get home right now, go to your room and wait for me, right? And just put the scare in. My dad never lifted a hand or gave us the strap or nothing ever. But, when I was thinking about it, that was the only time that I could see that he was visible, physically, like truly, right? Like the feelings. That was what it is. Like I knew that he was just furious in that. But it was the fear that somebody had gotten his kids, right? Gotten all of them. And what I was going to say with that, because in the two extremes, my mother was the exact opposite. She was loud, she was scary, she was demeaning, she was physically just it was just the total opposite. I have no idea how they made that marriage work. But because of my relationship with my mother, I became very attached to my father, very codependent on my father. And it took a lot of time, a lot of lessons, healing, you could call it, shadow work, to be able to get myself to that point where I can actually laugh about that. But if I were to walk down the sidewalk, right, somebody stopped me and rah, 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 and did that, I'd be right back at them in that, right? And that is in that stewardship to myself. And it's something, like Tammy said, we are stewards in the world, but we have to remember that we are stewards to ourselves first, and living in a world where people don't know that they can yell at me, and that I'm not going to react, because I am going to react in that, because of that self protection, because of that stewardship to myself. And there's got to be a way in the world where we can actually have base values. Maybe all the countries could get together and have a conversation and make something on a list, and like the 10 commandments. But it couldn't be the 10 commandments, because then that would be kind of disrespectful to the other religions out there, right? And of course, we could probably put one new religion out there. We couldn't we? Because religions were put together for groups and networks and different like-minded people, right? And a lot of it, I was just going to say, a lot of it, people didn't really get a choice, right? We were Protestant, right? I don't remember ever going to a Protestant church, but I tell you, every other denomination in Christianity, right? I went to that church growing up, and it was confusing. It was confusing for me, right? But not to get too far off of this idea, to get back onto the main branch of the tree, we are talking about a baseline of values. Now, it just came to my mind is When I was, I think I was about, we lived in this house twice, so uh, I forget the age, but I'm going to say I was 7 years old because when we moved into this house, I guess somebody had passed away, and this house was full of furnishings and books and dishes and beds, and it was furnished, but it was somebody who passed away, and I had a lot of fun going through the house. It was like treasure hunting, right? Going through the closets and the basement and the shed, and it was lots of fun. But in one of the buffet hutches, I found this book, and this book was a book of etiquette. Now, etiquette is manners, how to grow up to be a good girl, how to grow up to be a good boy, and then grow up to be a good student, or to be a good mother, good father, right? And I took that book, and it was about, oh, I would say maybe 6 years ago that I well, it was more than that. It was probably when I was in the lessons. One of the gentlemen that I had come across, he's passed away now, was a gentleman called Bob Proctor. And he's a thought leader out there. But he had this old book, and he used to keep elastic bands around it, right? And it was a book that was full of mindset and values and mindfulness and a lot of good good ideas in how to be good stewards for ourselves, but also be good stewards as the examples for others, right? And he dragged this book everywheres with him. 1961, the year that I was born, right? He got this book, and it was only, was it last year or the year before that he passed away? And he kept this book his entire life, like 60 years. He dragged this book. It was a ratty old book by the end with the elastic bands and pages falling out and everything. And I kept this book of etiquette. And specifically, there were only 2 pages in that book. And I think probably as a child, it was what I strived for myself. I failed miserably in that, but it was 2 pages. And about 6 years ago, I took those 2 pages and I laminated them. And there were these 2 pages out of that old antique book. It was early 1900s or late 1800s, this book, because I didn't want to drag this book around like Bob Proctor, this book of etiquette, because I believed in it, because I thought it was a way that people could better get along with themselves and be better stewards to themselves. And even if they didn't have good parents, the way, right, my parents were good parents, but good parents, they were my parents, but they were busy in their own lives, right? And again, we come from a dynamic family, so I use these examples for my own life. And I tried, right? Okay, I'm just going to show you. We'll show you the little girl one first, right? And if you can see that here, it's talking about how to, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be studious, right? Do you want to be, surrounding yourself with good people, right? Good friends, or are you going to hang out with a bad crowd because you are who you surround yourself with? And then again, are you just going to be, are you going to be like out partying with the boys, right? And when you say partying with the boys, it needs to be kind of updated for this day and age, right? But there's a girl there, she's out partying with the boys at some kind of ball or something like that. Or do you want to be a good student and apply yourself in your knowledge and, right, to get a good career? And then again, do you want to be a good mother? Do you want to be a good mother and really bring values to your children? Or right, are you going to end up as a drunkard in a bar and again hanging out with the boys and not accomplishing anything for yourself? And then right, and then our elderly years, do you want to be a good grandmother and pass those values onto your grandchildren? Or are you going to be old and wretched and complaining about the life you had, right? And it was the same kind of idea, right? For the boys, and this one here for the boys, that you are who you surround yourself with. You can be a good student and have good friends with good values, or you just gonna hang out in the back of the school smoking cigarettes and looking at the girls, right? Are you going to be a study and go to college and get a good career? Or are you going to be a drunkard and a good for nothing and somebody who just can't hold a job? And again, we can't criticize in that. We have to understand that sometimes, right, that's projected onto us. That's what's expected of us, right? But at the same time, we have free choice and we can choose something. We can choose something different, can't we? And then this one here, do you want to have a good job? Do you want to be the example for others? Or are you going to be, look at the guy here, right? Wearing the black mask like he's Batman or something, but he's actually a thief, right? And somebody's passed out drunk and he's pickpocketing and stuff, right? And then again, there's the grandfather with the child, and then there's an old man at the bar, right, reminiscing about how terrible life was, how it might have been different. And I found these early, and I did my best, for myself, right? But sometimes life takes us in different directions, and sometimes those directions are not so great. But we were saying yesterday, there are lessons in the things and the experiences that we have that we wish that we didn't have, right? And I would like to think, and I think possibly, well, possibly, I believe that when my time is done where I can't get out and about, that I sit in that rocking chair and I rock back and forth. And even if I don't have grandkids bouncing on my knees, that I can't be that example and tell those stories to my grandkids, right? I could do that with my nieces and my great nieces and nephews, but I won't regret it, right? I won't regret it because I did the very best that I could with what I had. And that's a truth. Even with the down and out with that person right there, where they're all miserable and cranky and they think, oh, my life was absolutely terrible. Even in the terribleness of the life, there were good moments too. For sure, there were good moments. But when we're in that negative, we don't remember all the good things. And I dragged these along, and I'm going to keep them right to the very end, not the whole book, but I'll drag these around with me and I'll pull them out every once in a while. But that's the thing, and it says, in the one side it says, what will his life be like? What will his future be? Right? What will her life be like? What will her future be? And it is in our choices. But I believe, just like this idea of etiquette, which is, I think, totally relevant. And even though the pictures and the going back to the late 1800s or early 1900s, their clothes would be different, the opportunities would be different, the lifestyles would be different. But those values and those choices that we make are still just as much relevant today as they were 125 years ago, right? And they will be just as relevant 150 or 200 years from now. So there's going to have to be some way that we're going to have to be able to have base values in a way that we can all manage to get along with each other, right? Even if we don't like each other, because those base values are like rules, right? And there has to be rules, there has to be accountability for each one of us because, you know, your children, right? You could have brought your children up to be in this group right here, right? But we are who we surround ourselves with, right? We are. And your next door neighbor could be running in this group. Your children's friends could be running in this group, right? And again, who we surround ourselves with is what we become, those values, right? And I would hate to think that just because somebody like that little Chinese boy, right, flicking his booger onto the sidewalk, and the little Caucasian kid going, ha ha ha, look at him. Oh, that's all just disgusting, right? But that's culture, right? And they don't think that's important. They think other things are important, right? And when they look at that little Caucasian boy blowing his nose into the hanky, right? And then it's getting stuffed into a pocket. And that little boy says, oh my goodness, look at it. He's saving his boogers, right? He's saving his boogers. And if you actually think about it, right, that is pretty bleh, isn't it? Right? Or somebody horking inside of their throat and then spitting it out. That's right. But those are not values. That right, that doesn't really count in here. Those are just cultural values, right? They're still keeping their nose clean, right? Aren't they? They're still being respectful, not to be in the presence of others where somebody else is going, oh my goodness, look at what's hanging from his nose. No, because it's been taken care of, right? So base values, I think in this day and age, right? It's going to have to arise at some point, and majority rules, right? And it has to be something where everybody would be agreeable on, right? Kind of like the idea of the 10 commandments, but not the 10 commandments, because you can't make one religion king of all religions, and that's what you would be doing by saying, okay, everybody's following the 10 commandments, and next thing you know, we're in World War III because of it, right? So it has to be something new. It has to be something agreed upon, right? And maybe not agreed upon by everybody, but by a group, by somebody like NATO, or right, or World Conference or something, and say, okay, we are getting too close to each other, right? And this is a good thing. We should be able to mix with each other, marry each other, have babies with each other. That's the way the world has been moving for a very long time now. And it's a beautiful thing because we need that diversity in us in order not to go extinct, right? And you guys hear me say all the time, right? It takes all kinds to make the world. Hello, Eugene. Hello, dear. It takes all kinds to make the world, but we have to learn to better get along and better respect, and because we don't know what triggers somebody, we don't know, right? If somebody from Iran knocked on my door and needed help, oh, I'm sorry, can't help you, right? And they were just like, oh, that's so disrespectful, right? If that was my home and somebody said, I need a glass of water, or I got a flat tire outside. Can you help me with fixing my tire? That you would have to be a good neighbor to do that, right? And I don't know. It was just something that I was thinking about, because we are so different, and we're finding, we are so different even within our family, because we're all learning these things now, right? And some of us are old school, right? Some of us are living, well, that's just the way grandpa lived, and we just gotta tolerate his yelling or chewing tobacco and spitting that on the ground and stuff, right? But if we have those baseline values, and I'm not saying you can't spit on the sidewalk or anything, but you know, you can't hit somebody, you can't yell at somebody, you can't pull somebody's hair, you can't, right? You can't bring up somebody's appearance in school, these things that are damaging to the kids, right? We want to bring up kids that are healthy and happy and want to hang out with people who are different from them, right? And you never know. Next thing you know, that little Caucasian kid might be flicking boogers from their nose, right? Because you're actually saving tissue, right? You're saving blowing your nose into tissue, so you're saving trees, right? You're giving nutrients to the ground. You're feeding the worms, right? So this is my idea about things, and who's to say whether or not it will come into effect? Because we're always changing, aren't we? But if we're talking about being good stewards, we have to look about being good stewards also for the future, right? And in looking out for ourselves and looking out for our kids and encouraging our kids to mix with people who are different for them without judging them as somebody who's, right, not worthy of being around, right? Because we never know what people are like. Some in some cultures, the kids, right, aren't talking unless they're being spoken to, right? And then those conversations are short. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Right. And in other ways, like, and then they're going to school and their kids are getting picked, or their friends are getting picked up by their parents. And that was a big thing for me. My parents never came to parent teacher meetings ever. I think my dad came once, and it was the last time he ever went to a parent teacher. My mother couldn't be bothered with that in any way. But I would see, when I would go with my friends to spend some time after school, because I was dragging my butt, right? I didn't want to go home. So I would go to my friend's house and play at my friend's house, and I would see how the parents would treat their children. And I would think, how come my mom doesn't treat me that way? Right? And it would be heartbreaking, but there wouldn't be anything I could do about it. It was just something that I had to accept, that that's the way it is. But also in that, there were lessons, because I got to appreciate what a good parent actually looks like, right? And I got to make those choices for myself, right? And we each one of us does. And I have to use my own family as examples in this. And lots of people would say, well, Cindy, you can't talk about your parents like that. That's just totally disrespectful. And I do get that. I grew up in that household. Respect thy, or honor thy mother and thy father. But living in two two extremes, like my dad was super kind, super loving, super affectionate, very smart, and never yelled at us, never raised a hand at us. And my mother was a totally different upbringing, right? A totally different culture. They were both English, I think. There's yeah, they're both European, right? But different what do you call that? Um ranks in, right? My mother came from aristocracy, if that, I can't pronounce the word, right? From came from money, and my father's family, right? They were outlaws. They robbed trains, right? But that was the way that they were brought up, and we are who we are surrounding ourselves with. And I'm so grateful that I woke up to some different ideas. This helped, right? And in the comparison, in the two extremes of my own parents, that helped lots. And also in having those few friends that I was able to see and experience, because I was curious and I was a spectator and I was a student in myself, because wasn't I wasn't that person that was outwardly um, aggressive in wanting have friends, right? In fact, I didn't want my friends to meet my family, right? I didn't want to have visitors at the house because I never knew when my mother was going to go off, and she made it quite clear that, right, that it wasn't something that was going to be appreciated if you bring your friends home. And if I did, there would probably be problems with that afterwards. So I learned pretty early in the comparisons as to a good upbringing and a bad upbringing, and neglect and poverty, and I really didn't understand addictions, though. I know my dad, he had a gambling addiction, but I did not really understand addictions until I was an adult myself, being a smoker, and right, and being addicted to cigarettes for like 10 years, and then myself becoming a gambling addict, and then really getting a Oh, and also, of course, the food, right? Like I've always been a food hoarder, but those were the diets and the restrictions that I had in my life. And I just said again, in my own choices, well, I'll go get a job myself and I'll buy my own treats, right? And I would just squirrel them away like I was a squirrel under my mattress, in my clothes, and right, that I became so compulsed about food, because in my regular, traditional, familiar upbringing, it wasn't something that I was entitled to. Maybe if I was given that option, the second helpings, or family going to restaurants and I'm getting a salad and everybody's getting burgers and fries and stuff. Like for me, that felt like punishment, right? I didn't understand it. It was never explained to me. You're on a diet, but then as soon as my dad had a bad gambling day, right? I was off the diets because the diets were expensive, right? So I was back on the craft dinner and the rice like everybody else. So it was a kind of a haywire kind of upbringing, but in those comparisons and in being the spectator and in the student of my surroundings, I got to learn the difference of right and wrong. And even though I did my very best in my own limitations and in those things that I didn't have any say in, right? I didn't always. I think probably it was a little bit of mixed for me, right? And I think in the end it worked out okay, because if I'm sitting in that rocking chair at the end of my life, right, I don't think I'm going to have any regrets. I'm probably going to be a little bit of myself, because, better late than ever, or better late than never, right? And I think that's true for me. And I think it's only been in my choices that we get those opportunities to course correct in what we get wrong, or, do better by our children, right? Than what we had in our own lives, or look out for those future generations long down the road when you've been gone for hundreds of years and say, oh my goodness, right? I contributed to our family, right? Moving forward a little bit. And, there are some things that cannot be fixed, right? I'm not going to be a mother, right? That opportunity for me has passed me by. I'm not going to be a grandmother, but I'm here, right? And I'm doing my thing. And as I move forward, as I do my own course corrections in my own life, I expect, I hope that I can be the example for somebody else to say, it's okay. We all make mistakes. We all get things wrong, right? And, if there was, right, there's always going to be these two extremes, isn't it? But I think we can move into the world. And we were talking about this yesterday, where it's going to be somewheres in the middle, right? And I think that's where I kind of aligned myself up somewheres, right? Something in the middle, right? Not perfect, not imperfect, just something in the middle. And that's by my own choices and that's by everybody else's choices. But it would help so much, right? That I can't be reminded of the person that I was, right? When somebody yells at me and that comes to the surface, right? And you guys probably know it too. When somebody just gets on that last one, you've just had it in the way somebody's been treating you, disrespecting you, just kind of bypassing what makes you feel bad, even when you have those conversations with them, or they use the things that they know bother you and they just, right, dig into it even more. And then what do? Take this job and right, and we're out of there. And that's happened to me so many times, right? And yeah, it could have been a different choice for me, but I don't know whether just holding out and just putting up with it would have suited me well, would have felt right for me, because that was not the way. That was just kind of crossing the line, right? Going against my values. And they're doing it. There are things that are changing. There are things changing in school. There are no bullying policies out there. There's workplace safety, that regulations that people have to follow when it comes to better business. There's also in those relationships, right? When it comes to how you treat your employees and how you treat there's guidelines for all of that. Even in being a YouTube creator, being mindful of guidelines with YouTube, not to cross those boundaries, right? And everybody should have an opportunity to live the life that they want to live, but they have to live that life in respect to who they're rubbing up with, right? Who they're hanging out with. And just understand that, what's okay for one person might not be okay for another, right? And being a good steward of each other, right? Whether you like somebody or not, I think that's only the right thing to do. And if we did finally sit around that round table and made a list of values, baseline values, right? Mindset, right? I like mindset because mindset is non denominational, right? And mindset is practiced in almost every culture, it's supposed to be practiced in almost every culture and every religion. They use mindset, but it's not specifically set for one religion. It's why I work with mindset, because I don't sit in any denomination at all. It's not to say that I never will, but in this moment, in order for me to make that movement and to be able to set up boundaries for myself, and respectful boundaries, that I'm willing, just as willing to give that respect to those same values to somebody else, right? Even knowing that I don't know what their boundaries are. But if I follow my own set of boundaries, if I can follow mindset, that maybe I won't get so much wrong, that I won't cross the line, I won't get punched in the forehead because I'm being disrespectful. And we have to remember too, right? The minority will always hold the majority accountable, right? So if there are that set of baseline values, and right, they're consistently being crossed, there'll still be somebody or something to answer to, won't there? Okay, you guys. Oh, and talking about that, oh my goodness, the bus driver that I had today, I took a bus to my sister's house because I was just loaded down with lazy hibachi and ingredients to make the soup. And I forgot to take the bacon to her house, but it was a good thing. She had some bacon in the freezer, so that was good. But I got on the bus, and the bus driver was so nice to me. And we had a little one sentence, because there was somebody behind me, one sentence kind of conversation between the two of us. And then as I was walking away, he was still talking, but he was changing it to French. But I don't understand French. I'm right. I live in a bilingual country where it's French and English, but I don't speak French, right? And I just said, "Oh, thank you." And he kind of laughed because he knew I didn't understand. And but it wasn't a way that he was laughing at me. He was just giggling by the fact that I just said thank you, and he just recognized that I didn't understand what he was talking about. But when we got to the next couple of stops, he put his coat on and everything, because they were switching out bus drivers. And instead of getting off the bus in the front, he walked up the aisle, and he wished everybody he walked by a wonderful day with a big smile. And I went, oh my goodness, that's mindset. That's positive energy, right? We need more bus drivers like that. And he went out the back door, and I thought that was amazing. And I bet you he got just as much out of doing that as, right? Well, I definitely got something out of it because I appreciate the kindnesses, right? But I'm sure there are people that were having bad days, and just to be recognized as a fellow human being, I thought it was pretty amazing anyway. That's why I mentioned it. Okay, you guys, let's get into a card. And oh, thank you, Tammy. Okay, you guys, let's pick a card. That worked out pretty good yesterday, right? We were talking the whole time about experience, and then when Tammy says, "Grab the front card," and what did we get? We got the word experience. You want to try that again tonight, Tammy, and pick the card? And only if I grab more than one card, but we'll see. Okay, you guys, let's just grab a card here. I grabbed one card. Okay, you guys, this is it. Oh, what a great card is this. Believe what we believe dictates our movement. And that is so true. Uh if we're talking about our values, right, we're going to move that way. It's like how we move in our beliefs and our religious ideas, but it just doesn't have to be for that, right? Because I didn't have a real sense of belief up until maybe, oh my goodness. I would have to say I always believed in myself, but my problem was I didn't think anybody believed in me. And part of why I'm still here is having that camaraderie, right? That you guys believe in me, that you guys consistently show up for me. And it is like uh that recognition. Oh, what I was going to talk about is very relatable to what I was going to talk about tonight until I just came in and flowed into something else. But because it's relatable to that, I'll actually go into it. I came into my live show last night, and I watched my live show and I thought, oh my goodness, Cindy, the message was pretty good. You're getting better. I'm like my own little cheerleader and stuff. And that idea that I believe in myself, but I have this still these tendencies from right my childhood, my way of thinking, that I don't always believe that people believe in me, right? That they don't truly trust in what I do or what I say. And when I came into my live show yesterday, I watched it and I didn't count how many times I did it. And I don't know if you guys kind of noticed tonight. I'm trying to keep note tonight, but I'll come into my live tonight afterwards and I'll sit and I'll watch my live and I'll count how many times I did it. But this thing that I do when I go right, and I'll say something and I'll go right, and I don't wait for an answer from anybody. I just continue with what I'm doing. I go right, da 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 da, right. And I went, oh my goodness, okay, Cindy, you are a creator, right? And oh, see what I just did just now? I did it again. But I do that, and I gave it some contemplation last night after I watched my live show. And I do that because it comes specifically from my childhood. It comes from kind of looking around, if I've got something to say and I'm looking for my backup. You know what I mean? I'm looking for that person to second that, to agree that, what I'm saying is correct. And I'm looking for that positive feedback in the moment. And it's not because anymore that I am insecure with the things that I believe in, my understandings and my beliefs. It is still, though, in looking to make sure that I'm not stepping on other people's toes, that I'm looking for the confirmation. And I wrote, here that it's going to be in my deliberate practice, in my consistency of taking note of what I do, because I believe that this is something that I want to work on, this to see this year if I can pull that word out. And it's in every single one of my lives, you guys. I know you guys know that I say that all the time, right? In whatever I do, I go, right? And then I just carry on. It's not like I'm asking you, right? But in my mind, it's something that I am asking you, but I'm just bypassing it because somebody's going to say, no, Cindy, you're not right. No, Cindy, you don't know what you're talking about, right? So I'm not giving you any time. I'm not giving you any time to course correct me, I'm just going to move really fast through that. But if somebody says, "Oh, you are right, Cindy. That is right." Right? And I bet you I would beam in that. That would make me feel so good in that. But it's not a good trait. It's probably quite irritating for some people. And I don't believe that as a YouTube creator, in being professional, in being in thought leadership, in the repetitiveness, in asking people to confirm, to agree, to say, yeah, Cindy, you're right. That isn't uh, the way that I want to move, right? And it's something that I want to course correct, but it's going to be in the consistency of paying attention. Remember what I said? What you think about is realized. It's like Tammy when she had that word community pop up in her day consistently, or that word happiness just kept popping up in her day. It's because it was in the top of her mind, and so she was noticing it constantly. And that's the same idea with me. So if I talk about that, and it's tied in with my beliefs, because I believe in myself. My problem is I don't always believe that people believe in me. So it's something that I'm going to work on going forward. And we're going to give myself for the rest of the year 10 months, 10 months. And we're going to see if I can pull that out of my conversation, right? At the very least, take note every time that I do that. And I was thinking, how can I be not strict with myself, but be accountable to myself? And I thought, well, maybe I can have a jar and I could put 50 cents in that jar every time I say that word right in looking for confirmation from others, that I could actually put that money towards my trip. I don't know what you guys think of that, but it was something that come across my mind. I'm going to work on it in any case. It's not something I haven't noticed before. I've noticed it many, many times, but I just say, "But I'm genuine. That's just me." No, that's just not me. That's my childhood surfacing up in a way that shows my insecurity in what I believe. If I want people to believe what I believe, right, I got to be steadfast in that and not look for confirmation, not look for, I second that. I'm not looking for, you got that right, Cindy, right? And it's always wonderful when we're on the same page. But all being unique, and because we live in this world of all different kinds, right? I have to be that example for others. And if I recognize that as a weakness, as a trait, an undesirable trait, I'm sure that other people have noticed it too. And it reflects on my confidence. And I feel sometimes I'm a confident person, but when I go right, right? Like, that's not showing. That's saying I'm looking for somebody to give me my confidence, right? To say that I'm right. And that's not the case, right? I believe, see, I do it so often. And if for the next little while, if I just take note of it, I'll get better at it. I know I'll get better. Anything that you apply yourself to, right? They say it takes 62 days. It will take me definitely more than 62 days to make that a habit. But if I pay attention to how I end a sentence, or when I'm looking for that confirmation, right? for that little bit of feedback that I'm just moving so fast because I know I'm not going to get it because that's the way that I was brought up, right? I've always believed to an extent in myself. I just didn't think that other people believed in me or wanted to hear what I had to say, right? Or was on the same vibe as me to think the same way. And so I thought, well, you know what? I have to be that person because, I'm supposed to be that example for others. And I don't want people that to feel that, even though I'm not a weak person, I'm sure the people who hang out to me, right, they kind of get it that I'm not a weak person, but I still have these limiting beliefs. And that's what that is. And when we have this word belief, and it's kind of funny because that's what I wanted to talk about tonight was belief, but I came in and I just went into something else. I went into values, and values isn't even a powerful word in my deck, right? There are tons and tons of powerful words, but we kind of ended up with these. It was kind of a draw every week out of a bag, or I think it was a cup. And this deck was put together out of 54 powerful words out of maybe 100 words, right? So this is my deck, and I'm going to get it marketed at some point. But yeah, we got that word. We got that word belief. And look at even in this confidence, right? Oh no, that's presence. Where's oh, I've already shuffled the deck already, you guys. Okay. So I guess we're done with that. But it's something that I'm going to work on, right? I can't expect everybody to just kind of set those goals and work towards them. Right? I'm working on my goals too, but I think this is a personal goal for myself. And being in a personal goal for myself, I think it's going to serve me in showing up and in having these important conversations. I'm sorry. I just took my vitamins and they're just kind of burning up my esophagus in the moment. It's just the way it works out sometimes. You guys. Oh my goodness. No, no, no. Don't put your phone number. Tammy. Yeah, because somebody gets your phone number and then that's not good, right? Yeah, so I'm just gonna delete your phone number there because I don't want anybody to have your number there. So I'm just gonna remove that. No disrespect to you, Eugene. I can open it up in any case. But yeah, phone numbers are a private thing, right? And I wouldn't phone you anyway. I'm not the person who phones on the conversations. Oh, oh no, no, I was gonna say, can you take it off? Could you could delete it, but I deleted it. I removed it, Tammy. So that was all good. No, I wasn't saying that you put it there. I was just saying that, can you take the number off? Because I don't want other people to see that number and then start texting them and phoning them and harassing them or whatever, right? But that was very thoughtful of you, though, Eugene. But yeah, yeah, the messages is not a good place for phone numbers. Okay, you guys, it's going to be my good cheer tonight. I'll be back tomorrow and we'll pick another word. I'm going to go back now, finish my coffee, watch my live, take the lesson for myself tonight, and count how many times I said, right? Okay, you guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.